Hi everyone, Chris here. Welcome to another one of our Beyond the Build vlogs. Although the aquarium's actually shut to the public for now, we're still working on some really exciting projects. We've recently teamed up with some seaweed scientists from the Scottish Association of Marine Science, or SAMS for short, over in Oban to see if we can grow kelp artificially in our kelp tank, in our main tank here in the aquarium. We're helping to explore the viability of the seaweed aquaculture in our coastal waters and hoping to get 2 different species of kelp to flourish naturally in our tank. So these bits of pipe are very special. They're sections of pipe that are covered in very finely wrapped twine. You can see here the twine going round and round the pipe. And on that twine has been seeded spores of 2 different species of kelp. This kelp is native to the east coast of Scotland. We've got one species called Dabelox and one species called sugar kelp. And they've been seeded onto the twine at SAMS over Dunstaffridge, just north of Oban on the west coast, where the kelp spores have basically been allowed to settle. Our proposal is to take these twine, wrap it around some rope, and then wrap that rope around our pillars and around our stacks in the kelp tank. And hopefully the little kelplets will then grow from the rope onto the stack themselves. You can see here a specialist hand-driven machine that basically uncurls the twine from the pipe and wraps it very neatly around a rope. The rope is a hemp rope, so we won't get any microplastics going into the kelp tank. And then that hemp rope will be wrapped around the pillars. You'll see that in a minute in the video, once the pillars have been measured to find out exactly how much of the hemp rope we need. It's quite a all hands on deck job. We had 3 divers in the water doing this, and you have to be very careful that you don't touch the little kelplets because they're very fragile at this stage and you wouldn't want to damage them unnecessarily. This is just measuring the pillar, measuring the stack just to start off with, just so we make sure that we're not overproducing any rope and the rope is the right length to be wrapped around that stack. We've spread the different species out throughout the kelp tank in different places and created a little map so we know which species is in which location. Claire here is now wrapping the hemp rope around the stack, keeping it nice and tight so hopefully the little kelplets will grow from the rope straight off onto the actual stack itself. When it was completed, we had 4 stacks wrapped in rope, and also the central archway in the tank has been wrapped as well. A couple of different ways of doing it. You can either wrap it in a helical style like you can see Claire doing with the stacks, or on the actual archway itself it's been wrapped vertically around the arch. It'll be just interesting to see which area gets better growth based on which area is coming into contact with the sunlight.
Hi, I'm Kati Michalek. I work at SAMS as a senior postdoc, working on seaweed cultivation and also a bit of shellfish cultivation.
You just want to tell us a little bit about the importance of seaweed aquaculture.
Ooh, that's a not so easy one to answer. So seaweed is beautiful because it occurs everywhere, no? You find it on all of your natural shores. It makes these huge kelp beds and provides a vast habitat for all kinds of marine life to even live in there as nursery ground, but also because they are photosynthetic, they are taking up all the energy from the sun, and a little bit of nutrients and warm water does the rest, and they convert that all into lovely oxygen and build up sugars and other important compounds in their tissue. So you can use seaweed for a range of applications, anything what comes to your mind from you can eat it, you can use it in animal feed. It's sometimes used in cosmetic products because some of the species have antioxidant capacities and many, many more. It's very rich in vitamins. It's very low caloric. So for people who have a problem with their cholesterol, it's a good choice as a food additive, and the list goes on. And if we are thinking big, then you could even consider using seaweed as a biofuel to make biomethanol and bioethanol, or use it as an alternative for plastic and packaging agents.
what about the climate benefits of growing seaweed?
So because they photosynthesize, that means they take up all of that lovely carbon dioxide dissolved in the seawater and they convert that into oxygen. So they are helping our planet basically to stabilize all of that carbon dioxide in our atmosphere that ends up in our ocean. And it does that anyway naturally wherever seaweed occurs or any other marine plant-like organism that photosynthesizes. But by basically helping it along and having a seaweed farm, you can do your fair share and contribute to that process. But you don't have to do anything for it. The seaweed does it all themselves, and that's my favorite part, I guess, about seaweed cultivation. You don't need much land use at all, actually. So if you are skipping the nursery phase when they are very baby, but you're just talking the cultivation, it doesn't require any land. It doesn't require feeding. It doesn't require the use of fresh water. So all of this is quite an advantage over other forms of aquaculture. If you're thinking, for example, of big-scale salmon production, for example.
And does the seaweed farming have benefits for other areas of the marine environment, like fisheries, for instance?
It could. So there's lots of work, especially in the last 2 decades, I would say, looking more into how to make use of seaweed and other trophic levels to maybe outbalance some of the more negative associations of large-scale fish farming. So then we are thinking integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, and that just means you have species of different feeding regimes. So for example, your salmon in your fish pen, they would not eat all of their food, and some of this uneaten food remains in the water column, and also they metabolize some of the food they eat, so it ends up in the water as fish poop. And other organisms like your shellfish, they are very effective filter feeders, so they can take up all of these particulate compounds from the water, but there's a lot of not particulate matter in the water that you can't see. It's all dissolved nutrients, and that's then available for the seaweed. And if you position it cleverly with the current flow, and you have your fish and your shellfish and your seaweed, you make the most out of your system. You are not harming any other species because they have different food preferences, so there's no competition, but you are basically making the best use of the available space and the resources, and you help not to have any negative impacts on your environment you are growing in.
Okay, and do you want to talk a little bit about this project in particular?
Oh, this one is exciting. So we arrived here, and the goal is to see how well seaweed farming would do on the east coast of Scotland. So for those who are a bit more aquaculture affine, they will have noticed lots of the aquaculture in Scotland is happening on the west coast, and that doesn't only apply to many of the fish farms, but also to all of the shellfish farms and the seaweed farms. The west coast just lends itself. It's less exposed than the east coast. The weather is still rough at times, but definitely not as rough as it can be here. And we are just set up on the west coast. So we wondered, can we apply that to this side of Scotland? And it's great to have Macduff Aquarium here, because that gave us the opportunity to take our little baby seaweeds, which we sourced from here, from the east coast. We brought them all the way back to SAMS, and we grew them out in our commercial nursery until they had roughly the size of 0.5 centimeter to 1 centimeter. And then it's sitting on a very, very fine yarn that's called twine. And this fine yarn you wrap around a holding structure, which could be a rope or anything else. And here today we used hemp rope. It's a nice biological material. It degrades over time. You're not introducing any plastics. And we just unwound our seaweed babies onto this carrier rope, and then the divers took it down into the big fish tank behind me and wrapped it around different structures in the tank. So on these vertical pillars, we tried like a short scale approach where it's just helically wrapped around that pillar. And we did that on 4 locations throughout the tank with one species, Saccharina latissima. So that's our sugar kelp. It grows quite fast and very big. And we have a second species here, Alaria, and that was deployed over that arch using the same principle. And Alaria is a bit more hardy, I would say, especially in stronger currents. So we can not only try 2 different species here, we can also have a proof of concept, does it even work? And it should, because the light conditions, this is natural light, so the same as they would have outside. There's enough nutrients in the water for sure, thanks to all of the fish and other marine organisms living in the tank. And the water temperature is also ambient, so what we find outside at the coast. But we're much more sheltered here, and that's important, especially when they are very small, the seaweed babies. They need a bit of peace and calm to have enough time to develop their roots, so to speak, which for seaweed is called a holdfast, and that then grabs on tightly to the rope. And once they're strong enough, they potentially can withstand also a bit harsher environments.
Anything else you want to add?
I'm really keen. I want to come back in a couple of months' time and see how it works. So now we just have to be patient. They just went out today. They look really good. We have really nice seeding density. The seed looks healthy. And now we just have to hope that there are not many sea urchins and or herbivorous fish that take a little nibble on the seaweed buffet. And yeah, I'm keen to see how it looks like in a month or two from now.
Excellent.